Audio Content Lab.
Sounds like
Marketing.
Sounds like marketing.
Michael St. James is a singer, songwriter, producer, and marketing professional from Denver who has navigated the path as music publisher and licensing agent, consulting on the business of music. In his current role as co-founder of Better Ad Music, Michael provides jingles, trailers, music production, and creative consulting services for a wide variety of industries and clients. And we're so grateful he could join us today. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So chipper, so lifelike.
I know. Oh, I mean, it's because we're doing this at a great hour of the day. I love it.
It is 10 a.m. here, people. I just want everybody to know the world is up, okay? And we are too. Man, seriously, thank you so much. You're such a joy to follow on Twitter and social media, and I'm really glad we got to lock you down. But I want you to provide us a highlight reel of your journey to the world of music production and starting Better Ad Music.
Well, it all started in the last century. No, growing up, I come from kind of a musical family. My grandpa was a drummer in the Harry James band. My grandma was an amazing pianist, although she was better at being an alcoholic, so she really didn't make it as a pianist.
You got to balance those two.
Yeah, my mom was an opera singer, and she did some opera in Denver, and then, but later on in life, I would find out from her. I always felt guilty because I was kind of raised around music, and I wanted to be a musician. My great aunt had a piano around, or my grandma had a piano around, and
right.
A lot of music being played around. So like coming up on like big band and swing, and my mom was turning me on to the Beatles and Motown and James Brown. So like
cool.
I had a good head start. Like I had people who knew good music coming up.
Nice.
And I always thought, oh, my poor mom, she gave up her dream to have me.
Right.
And I would later find out that she was like, no, my dream was to have you. I didn't really want to be some opera singer in some like traveling
caravan.
Company.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. She's like, this is really what I wanted to do. It's up to you to be the musician. I was like, oh, okay. So like early on, that's what I wanted to do. And I didn't know what my path was going to be. I mean, I was in choir, I was in, church choir, and then also in school I was doing all of that. Kind of picked up guitar around 12. But I had already been kind of playing piano by ear. By the time I got into my teens and I was going to like take lessons to become a serious musician.
Yeah.
I would go into like piano lessons or guitar lessons, and they're like, well, play me what you know. And so I'd play like Love Comes Walking In from Van Halen. And they're like, well, okay, you know how to play piano. You're doing it wrong, but you know how. Like my thumb's wrong, my wrists are moving.
Yeah.
So I kind of I was self-taught, I was taught by ear, but I also need to self-teach myself to kind of be better at being, a composer, to actually learn, sight reading, learn music. And I wouldn't say I'm that. I know a lot of musicians say, well, it's weird that like Ed Sheeran says he can't read music, or Paul McCartney. And they're kind of lying. They can, but I think it's the same thing as I say, well, I don't say I'm a sight reader because I know people in symphonies that, they'll sit down with a piece of music and play it perfect.
Right.
That's who I consider a sight reader. So that's kind of was the genesis of everything. And I got started like really early on. I was doing an a cappella group in high school that was making tons of money at like 16.
Wow.
We'd do doo-wop stuff for like Cool 105. And then we'd play like Elks clubs and do like barbershop quartet. And they're like, who are these 4 16-year-olds? How do they know barbershop quartet?
Right.
And yeah, and we're like, I just kept going, and then I did a demo and got into A&M for a record deal.
Wow.
At 16 or 17, a buddy of mine, we flew out to LA during spring break. Like I told our principal, I'm not going to be back because I'm in LA trying to get a record deal for a cappella, by the way, which is hilarious. But at the time, this is like the late 80s, it was hot. Acapella was hot. Rockapella.
Where in the world is
Carmen San Diego.
Oh yeah.
Take Six was happening, and there was a bunch of things. And the guy even told us, he was like, sorry, that ship has sailed. Nothing's going on a cappella. Well, like the next few years, I would hear Maxwell House do an a cappella spot.
Yep.
Many of them. Levi's.
Yeah.
You had Bobby McFerrin blowing up, all that. And, not to make this about a cappella, but that dude was wrong. so that was my first lesson in be true to yourself musically, even though it's like niche. But also along those same lines, it wasn't about playing Wembley. It wasn't about having a plane for me or anything like that. I literally wanted to make jingles. I loved the Dr. Pepper spots and the, have a Coke and a smile spots, and the McDonald's jingles. I thought Barry Manilow was probably the best songwriter ever. And, I was all about the jingles because that's who I would hear repeat music back to me as a kid, right? Your friends singing jingles, or like when you wanted to decide which restaurant to go to, they'd kind of sing the jingle. Like, oh, you deserve a break today.
You've been going strong all day. Yeah, you deserve a break today at McDonald's.
And you're like, oh, he knows that, but like he's not going to sing me Motley Crue, to me, I was like, those are the stars. The jingle writers are being heard and seen by millions of people, even though, I loved metal and new wave and rock and all the rest of it. I was like, that's what I want to do. And so I started writing jingles in my 20s, and I wrote a jingle for a brand that was called Incredible Universe. You may not know it, but they're basically like Best Buy Circuit City before that happened. And it was this massive store that sold electronics before there were really electronics. Like, I bet there was a lot of Casio, calculators that were there. But it was just as like home computers were starting to happen in the kind of early mid 90s. And so that was like the first real jingle work. And when I took it in to get it mixed, I went to it. You'll probably know this, but there was a guy here called Norton Fricke.
Oh,
you remember him?
Oh, huge.
Okay. Norton Fricke and Associates. We help accident victims. Call 59-LEGAL for your free initial consultation.
So Norton Fricke was a huge. He was a real trailblazer in advertising for lawyers, for law firms in Denver. For
so true.
Don't know.
Across the country, across the country, dude.
And he was based here, and we got into his world because he actually had a company called NF Advertising that ran a studio that did all of the lawyer advertising, and they did 1-800-DENTIST, and they had this cool program back in the day where you could do a prompt and find the dentist by using your phone. So you'd enter in your zip code, and it had like a little bit of like machine learning even in that. They had these telephone switches in the studio. And so as we got into it, he was like, hey, do you want to do some work for us? And I was like, yeah, because they had heard the Incredible Universe jingle.
Nice.
And I did the voice. Here's how amateur I was. I got the gig for Incredible Universe. They're like, we want it up tempo. We want it to be fun, exciting, to come shop with us. Here's what the ad copy is that they're going to read. I do the whole song, and then I did the copy too. I did the voiceover. So I'm like, come visit Incredible Universe Saturday for 30% off. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing. But I turned it in with it, and they're like, we need it stripped out. We have a voiceover artist.
Oh.
You're supposed to do the music.
Excuse me for succeeding.
But they liked it. And so NF Advertising hired me to kind of do voiceovers, and there I was, boom. Now I'm right in the middle of advertising and jingles and marketing and copywriting. And so like one of the first things I did that weekend was a monster truck commercial, which, dude, dream job, right? Sunday. Kids are free, 50% off. And here's how green I was. I'm on the mic in a big studio doing a voiceover, and I was doing the echo of the voice. Like instead of knowing that they do that in post, or it's a plug-in, or it's a knob you turn, I'd be like, kids are free. I would do it that way. And so, but because of that, I'm like, hey, you guys want the music? And they're like, yeah, sure. So I go and turn the music around. And that's kind of where my little jingle writing started. And then I was doing bands, and I was in a few bands that were kind of blowing up in Denver, and we did national touring and stuff. And I got kind of lost in, I've always been a songwriter. So, but I separated those two. Like I knew what jingle writing was versus songwriting. And when it really turned around was one weekend, we got an offer for one of the songs that I wrote that was on the radio called Starting Tonight. And Warren Miller, who does skiing movies, if you're a ski.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Dude. They came to us wanting to license this song for the film. And so I'm literally in my Capitol Hill apartment, and they send over a courier with the check and the contract. I'm thinking it's going to be a few $100. And we were a fairly popular band in the late 90s. And so we were making pretty good money. And so like, what happened is they showed me the check, and the check was more than the band made all weekend. And I signed it in my robe and underwear. And I was like, oh, this is where the money's at. Yeah. Like we just did 3 nights for, probably around $4,000 or whatever as a band. But it's, it's humping gear and singing 4 hours and changing strings,
sound check, and
it's all of that. Yeah. Or touring, which is far worse. Ours or I could just wake up in my robe and sign a check. I think this is the way to go. So that's when I was like, okay, so what is this? That's music publishing, and that's music licensing. And it's the publishing side and knowing how to clear a song with the recording side and the publishing side. As a songwriter and as the person that ran the band, I owned both sides of it. So it was very easy for me to do it. But I realized, oh, okay, this is where it's at. I jumped in both feet, and that's what I've basically done since then. Has become, I still run a label. I still do songwriting and producing and all of that. But that's where I realized, oh, that's where the money is. And that's how you get into advertising. That's how you get into shows or movies, is music licensing. And so that is where it all started.
God, so good. What was the name of the band you were in?
Soul Thieves.
Totally. Wow.
Soul Thieves.
No way.
Heartbreaking, butt shaking, love making music. How's that for copy?
It's perfect.
You want to do one of those? Come on down to the show. It was weird because we were, a bunch of kind of hard rock guys and metal guys. I'd been in other bands like that. And then I'd been like a solo act playing ballads, all over the place as an acoustic guy. And we did this band, and it was like, straight ahead, like acoustic rock pop at the time, it was sort of, and you could put us with like sort of, it was like kind of Nickelback at the time.
Okay.
And I'm trying to remember who's the band that did 3 a.m. 3 a.m. I must be lonely.
Oh my God. No, what's his name? Rob Thomas, right? The way you
Thomas,
just sang that.
Yeah, it was like those kind of bands. We were on Alice, it was like hot AC kind of music. And it was funny because all my metal friends were like, yeah, you're kind of a pussy band, Oh yeah, a lot of chicks like that. I'm like, oh yeah? Who comes to your show? Bunch of smelly dudes? Because that's what it was. Like, we became like the band for naughty mommies.
You're perfect.
Which is awesome. Like the radio station would kind of get behind us, and they would do this sort of naughty mommies night out. And and dude, there is nothing better than like late 30s, early 40s women with their one night out a weekend to see the band. Oh, they go hard. It starts at 5 o'clock. They're getting off work. They get loaded and they're like, I love this band. You guys are so sexy. What are you doing after the show? It's
nice.
So awesome. Yeah. So I would let my metal friends make fun of me all they wanted. I will take the hot chicks in the front row.
It's funny. I was just telling my kids, I was, part of the rock scene back right in the 90s, right when it went from like hair metal into like grunge and stuff like that. And I'm telling you, man, that's what I was telling my kids. I was like, these guys in like with the hairspray and the makeup and the spandex, like we were all kind of like whatever, but the women at those shows were going crazy. Like
Crazy.
it was a totally different world, and we couldn't understand it because we were like, grubby dudes practicing in a garage. We had no idea these guys were on like a totally different level. It was amazing.
Totally.
Yeah, no chick like loves you for your jean jacket, but like they will talk to you about your mascara.
Yes,
they'll be like,
exactly. We did not understand. It didn't matter. Oh my god.
No, totally. So then after that, I dove in and I got to do some ad work for Adidas and Hallmark and Mini Cooper and Slim Jim and where it comes to better ad music is that really started about resurrecting like TV opening themes from the 80s and 90s. So the market became something to where we were getting briefs that were like, we want this feeling, and it was nostalgia. And you'll still see it now. I think Progressive has been doing it with like sort of 90s theme openers or whatever.
Sure.
But you can't license, what we do, baby. You can't really license that for a commercial. But if you could write it in a different way, basically take the Golden Girls song,
Thank you for being a friend.
take whatever, Perfect Strangers, and like make that a newer song, but make it like that's a brand new show, or like we just found it from late 80s, early 90s.
Wow.
And that's kind of what we were doing, is that no one else could really do it realistically and make it sound like it was then. So my co-producers and that's what we were trying to do, is make it sound like it actually was recorded then for a show that never existed. And that's where a lot of brands and properties kind of glommed onto that, and that's sort of run its course. There isn't that much of that anymore now for the opening themes. And seriously though, some of the best music I've ever written, and I love doing it, like I could have like a real big hit song and I would still look back at some of those songs and be like, that just makes me feel good that could have been an opening theme for Perfect Strangers. And so it's all part of like St. James Media and stuff, but like Better Ad Music started kind of with that, and then also the umbrella of licensing existing material, as well as writing like bespoke material.
So when you get, I wanted to ask you about that. When it comes to putting music to an ad, like where do you start when, like you just kind of explained these different TVs, shows and stuff like that. But like, like you said, this kind of run its course. So now, like, where do you start helping someone find a piece of music, either, for their ad or their marketing or whatever?
Right. So, I guess it depends on the level. Like locally, you really have to regionally or locally, you really have to handhold clients. Normally the owners are involved, and they have an idea of what they want because they think, I've run a business, or I've started this business. Now we have 7 locations and we're going to record, some sort of a jingle. I know better than you, musician. So they'll be way involved. And so a lot of times you have to sort of handhold them and convince them the right kind of music to use, because they don't understand the demographics of music. So like, for instance, we were approached by somebody, and I will not say who, but we were approached by someone who, like, a big company they've got like 10 locations regionally, and like maybe 6 or 7 states, and they really wanted to do a 1950s style kind of jingle. And I'm like, okay, yeah, we can absolutely do that, but who are you trying to get to buy your items, your furniture or whatever, right? And they're like, oh, well, we want young couples, they're just getting married and buying a new house, right? That's the right demographic for that, redoing their living room or something. And I was like, okay, now, do you think a 27-year-old knows who the fuck Bill Haley is? Like,
Right.
I mean, or cares, or thinks that that's fun. And by the way, this is before Mrs. Maisel kind of blew up, but
Right.
so I was like, this is not going to match your demographic. Like we'll do it for you and it will be a great sounding song, but I don't think it's going to drive numbers, you know? And so you have to, when you're at that level, you need to be a little bit more of a consulting expert with them and let them know. That doesn't mean that you're going to do, you know, mumble rap. It doesn't mean you're going to do something that like hits that demographic specifically, but you want to sort of find the right niche for the demographic that's trying to hear those songs or try to attach to that music messaging. So that's kind of local and regional. On the national level, on the big level, we often get what are called briefs, and you know, it's just like the same as an advertising brief, but it runs down how long the music is going to be, what kind of styles. They give you some reference tracks, and we either get, like as a licenser, I either get instructions on finding pre-existing music to license, and that's what we call a sync for synchronization. Oh, or they will tell us, you know, give us a shot at producing it yourself. And so it kind of depends on the brief on whether you're licensing pre-existing music or doing it bespoke and like writing it yourself.
Wow.
Does that answer that?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it comes down to the fact that you're not just in it for the music, which drives the generation of the stuff, but you're also saying, I want this to work for you. You
Right.
know, like think about who's going to be listening to this. Think about where the market is headed, and how do those conversations go? I mean, have you ever got a lot of blowback and you had to push through, or like those kind of
Yeah.
things?
Yeah, I mean, I've walked away from a lot of them because I mean, you have to look at it. Look, I get it. If you're listening to this and you're in your early 20s and you're trying to make a living in music, you're willing to do anything.
Oh,
And I
for free.
remember
Gonna
those
do it
days.
for free. I'll
Yeah,
pay
you're
you
doing
to
it for
do the
free.
gig.
You don't ever want to lose an opportunity, you know, and I get it. I understand the impetus of that. But for a lot of us that have been doing this for decades, cough, cough, you realize it's a long game and you meet the same people. You meet people who have been doing things for a long time. The biggest goal you should have is to stay in the game at all. But part of that is to be known for your quality, right? Not just known for, oh, yeah, you did it and you took the check. And so I think it's really incumbent upon musicians when working with marketers, creative directors, advertising principals, you need to be as knowledgeable as you can about their industry, like about what they have to do. So I personally, because I've been involved in that side of things, I know they're looking at ROI. I know they're looking at metrics. I know that if the ad doesn't drive, you know, uptick in customers or sales or awareness, that they're not going to use it anymore.
Right.
And that means that even if they're asking for something, they may be asking me for, like I said, that 1950s song or whatever.
Right.
And it's incumbent upon me to tell them that's not going to work. I'll do it for you, but let me pitch this.
Right.
And if they will not go down that road, I kind of don't want to be associated with it, you know? And I may be wrong, by the way, and I may be wrong. That 50s song may drive tons of sales because it's nostalgic. And like, see, I would have been fine if it was a niche marketing campaign because they were doing like a retro kitchen set or something. That made sense to me. But if you're trying to sell the brand new $2,000 couch that is supposed to be in a contemporary modern home, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. And so, you know, by the way, anytime I've walked away from one of these things, and this is the same example, the reason why you're like probably racking your brain on who was this, which company was it? It's because they ended up not doing it. Because, you know, I think that whomever they spoke to, they even probably tested it out and it didn't work. And so I was right. I mean, there isn't some huge 1950s music campaign behind a massive furniture company. But the more important thing is my music isn't behind that. and so I guess that's what I'm saying is that as a musician, especially on the music and marketing side, I mean, and this is a tough road to walk, right? You don't want to be too forceful and you don't want to make it seem like you know more than them, but you do want to like be an equal and say, hey, let's work on this together. I have an idea. Or like, if you're young and you have no contacts and you don't have a reel, or you don't have, work behind you to stand on, do that 50s song, but also do 2 other demos with it to go, here's what you wanted, but here's what I'm thinking. What do you think about this? And you can convince them sometimes with the music.
Right. But and it's interesting because the material has to inspire that conversation, and you have to be willing to crank it out, saying, well, here's a hard rock version, here's a hip hop version, here's a doo-wop version. Like, you have to be able to be flexible around those things.
Oh my God. So that happened. Sidebar here. That happened once with a company where they wanted, it's what we call a round robin. So it's like you come up with a jingle and then you do it in like 4 different genres. So it may be sort of like a children's song, and then like a country version, and then a blues version, and then sort of a futuristic DJ version or whatever. And what sucks is when they take them all, because then it talk about market confusion. Like, you guys are in marketing, and can you imagine if the owner of the company goes, yeah, we're going to run with them all, and we're going to buy a spread of radio ads or whatever, and you're like, how am I going to measure this? Like, how am I possibly going to see whether this is effective? And that happened, and I was like, I know which one I thought would work, and I sort of bet my fee on it, and the owner hated all of them. His wife loved them. And so, and as much as he hated them, people would come into the store singing it. It's like, okay, so I think they're out of business now. It's a company called Saltbox.
Mm.
And so there was this like children's version, which was Saltbox home and patio, boom, 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 right? And then there was like, well, you need some brand new furniture. It was one of those blues songs, but people came in singing it, and he would get mad. He was like, I don't want to be known for this song. And I'm like, people are coming in to buy something. Like, that's what we're doing here.
Well, and here is an interesting other. I mean, this is all sidebars, friends. This is just the tangent episode, but
we give up.
That's what happens with me. Sorry.
No.
It
It's
happens
perfect
with us.
No, yeah, that's what I'm saying. But you are, you are skilled and you have tons of experience in this area. So I wanted to get your take on this. Is what kind of advice do you have for people who may be thinking about doing a jingle, but they don't want to look corny? Like, I mean, that's another thing. Paul and I worked with personal injury lawyers, and we did lawyer marketing. And it's a very interesting industry because they have to own their firm, and then they have to market their firm. And they don't teach you how to do marketing in law school. So a lot of lawyers are like, they are pushed to be marketers, but they have no experience, and they do not want to be looked at in a way that makes them seem unserious or, non-professional. And I'm just wondering what advice you have to people about, like, what is that corniness, the fear of corniness, and then you're just like, you're marketing, like you're out here and you don't want to be embarrassed, like,
yeah,
bro.
Like, it's corny. Like, there's a certain, I don't know, like we've talked about it, how almost like there's and I think you're probably the right person to ask about this. Like, jingles are almost kind of like they have a form, like a jazz standard or something. Like, there's something about it that makes it different, right?
There is. I mean, that's it. The whole game is memorability, right? The whole game is whether or not you were affected by it. And this goes into a little bit of dark arts of marketing, right? It's whether or not you hate it or love it. The worst thing is that if it just went by. Right. If it just went by you on the TV or on the radio, whatever. Like, a great example of that just recently. So, I mean, there's a few, right? So Liberty, with the whole liberty,
Yep.
liberty. That's corny as fuck, right? There's no tagline. There's no what they do. There's none of the rules involved in that of like, we'll explain our organizing principle or your value,
the
your
USP.
value add.
Yeah.
There's none of that in there, but that's more of an awareness campaign. And it's more of a, like, just drill it into their head 10, 15, 20 times. But I mean, in general, there are so many syncs that work, and this works in television too, where and when I say television, I mean like a TV show. But this works where you'll have very serious musicians that will finally kind of give up. And I've had this with some musicians I've worked with that they'll finally give up and they'll be like, you know what? I'm just gonna write this stupid thing. And they'll write the stupid line that like, I love you. I love you. There, fuck it. Go ahead, take it. And that's what gets placed.
Yep.
And that's what gets used
Yep.
because it's memorable and it's different and it's not serious. And it does matter the form, right? For like personal injury attorneys, you're probably not going to have lyrics. You know what I mean? It's more the kung bum 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 bum. It's like we're serious in criminal law or personal
Put some
injury.
timpanis in it. Yeah.
Yeah, put some timpanis and not too many crashes, but some timpanis. No gongs, Jake. But like a great example of this recently, like if you need a use case study, what BK did with what Burger King did with Whopper with OKRP, right?
Yeah.
Whopper, Junior, double, triple, Whopper, flame grill taste with perfect toppers. I rule this day.
Yeah.
They decided to make it on purpose annoying and out of tune, and they put a lot of work into that to make that jingle over and over and over in different forms. And then that makes someone get on TikTok and do their own and make fun of it, and that means the marketing is winning, and you can see it in the sales numbers. And so those are the kind of things where I think musicians have to get out of their own way of trying to be cool. How to do it, a little hint here is create a separate standalone thing. So like Better Ad music is separate from Michael St. James music or whatever. You can create like a separate little shop that music comes from, if you're going to do sort of more devil may care kind of, I don't care if it comes out cheesy or not. And I think, there's a lot of bands and artists that think that like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to be ruined if this song hits on a big national campaign because this doesn't sound like my album. And I'm like, well, it didn't ruin Justin Timberlake. It didn't ruin Barry Manilow. It didn't ruin a lot of the people who have done it before you. But if you're so cool that you think your fans will abandon you because you made 40 grand on a national campaign, okay, then get out. Don't do it.
And all you have to do is look at the what's the dude from Presidents of the United States of America? Is Chris Ballou? Is that his name?
Oh yeah.
Bro, that's a good example of somebody who came out, did something cool, but also created this extensive library of just throwaway shit tracks that he was like, meh, who cares? And they're just getting hoovered up by licensing and syncs and all this stuff. And people are like, oh man, that's great. But he created this sort of, I'm over here doing this ad stuff, but I also have my band. And that's an exact representation of that firewall, like the coolness firewall. And plus it's like coming from where you're coming from, which is doo-wop acapella and then metallic, like Naughty Mom parties. It's like you were okay to kind of be slightly embarrassed of some way.
Totally.
Like, how does embarrassment kind of play into creativity? Can you just riff on that? I mean, we are way off, but do it.
Yeah, well, no, but like that, it's part of the same. It's part of the same ethos. It's the same thing. It's the same thing as marketing. Like, I don't care whether you make fun of me or whether you praise me, whether you love it, whether you hate it, just make sure you're talking about me, right? Like that is the marketing ethos, is that how then it's up to a lot of people in the stream of sales, marketing, advertising to define how that moves to a sale or to the customer journey.
Yes.
But but the first part of it is pay attention, right? The first part of it is get the attention.
Right.
I think, again, this is a long-term way of thinking about music and art in general, but because it the same thing happens with copywriting, the same thing happens with slogans,
design, all that stuff.
Yeah, the same thing happens there, is that, listen, this isn't it. If you think this is the last thing you're going to do or the best thing you're going to do, it probably is. because you're not going to get you're not going to move on and grow and get better jobs or do different things. And if you want to box yourself into this corner of like, I just never want to not, I never want to be seen as not cool. Like, trust me, you will be seen as not cool at some time if you're doing it right. Like,
Right.
and the only exception to that is there are few exceptions where if you are an artiste, you are someone, like a Kurt Cobain or even like a Lady Gaga, those kind of people. If you're an artiste, I get it. Don't sell out. Don't get into this. Don't get into the commercialism. But honestly, most of you aren't. Most of you are just music makers fucking around, trying to write some things, trying to get laid, whatever it is. Most of you are not have the single music vision like David Bowie does and could control the whole narrative throughout your whole life. It's just not going to happen that way. And the sooner you get next to that like to be open to the excitement of working on all these different kinds of music, that's when it kind of opens up to you. I was lucky in that, coming from where I come from, from church music to doo-wop to acapella to metal to grunge to pop rock. Like, I've been able to traverse a lot of these things simply because I've lived that long. Like if I, and I think, but I think it's even more difficult for a young composer or musician these days is that they're chasing virality, right? They're chasing how do I come viral, and to them that means cool, right? That means to them 1 million people saw it and loved it, and that's not necessarily the case. Like that fish song on TikTok, if I were a fish, that's kind of blowing up.
If I were a fish and you caught me, you'd say, look at that fish, shimmering in the sun, such a rare one, can't believe that you caught one. If I were a fish and you
I think that's great. It's a great moment. It's not a career builder, but live that and work through that. Just don't think it's the last thing or the best thing you're going to do.
It's great
So
advice.
how do you balance that though? Because before, we were kind of talking like the 50s doo-wop thing where you were, talking about saying, hey, some things like I have artistic integrity. I'm not going to be involved in this because I don't think it's a good fit. But at the same time, you also have to decide, but I have to step out and maybe stretch into something that is, uncool or whatever. Like it seems a little gray, or is it not? Do you have something where you're like, this maybe is not what I would consider my thing, but it's a good thing? Like, does that make sense?
No, that totally makes sense. The way that I do it, and this is, this may not apply to everyone, but the way I do it is no matter what like creative endeavor I'm doing, I don't think about it insofar as I want it to be seen as cool. I want it to please me. So like if I'm doing like a jazz track, and I'm not a jazz musician, but I know some. And if I'm doing that, I want to hear how I would do the jazz thing, but not what I think everyone would consider the best jazz piece. And it's kind of the same thing with doo-wop. Like I didn't care whether or not, like I was 16 and I knew that like 16-year-old girls, like I'm not going to get laid for singing in the still of the night, although I did.
Okay,
But, like, I'm just saying,
listener.
but that's mostly because I wanted to really believe it. I wanted to be in that. And so if you believe it, it's the same thing as like those 90s themes things. You can write it as cheesy as you want, but if you perform it, like if you're singing on the mic or if you're playing it like as a real exercise in like, I believe in this. I want this to be the best, cheesiest thing it is. It comes through to where it's not like you're making fun of it inside of it. You're making fun of it because you're doing it. But when you do it, you're doing it with passion and you're doing it with humility. And like that's where I find when people move out of their own genre and they want to do something kind of away from what they're used to doing. If you do it with humility and passion, of anyone else. Like if that was someone else's genre, do it like they would, even though it's not your thing. It comes through on the performance. And this is kind of a weird thing because we're talking about audio, right? We're talking about recordings, and a lot of times that comes down to the performance. It's not even the composition necessarily. It's how well you perform it and mix it. And I find that that's where a lot of these things fall down. If you're not doing it like passionately, it's going to come off that it's sort of a throwaway. But even if it's cheesy and you really put like some love into it and like, man, I'm gonna really nail this for what it is, it does come through. It's just like anything on audio. Like you can hear the difference if I say this, I'm having a great day today. And then if I do it like this, I'm having a great day today. The second one had a smile on it. And you will feel that smile, whether it's on audio or not. So it has to do with like the performance of it. And I guess in a lot of ways being an actor, like that, there has to do a lot of that with being a recording artist or a recording musician. You need to act as you're recording it, as if this is the best piece of music I'm doing today. And I know this is like college stuff, but it is, I think I've seen it. We record in big studios and at home, and I see it with people all the time, even professionals. They're like I'm like, yeah, you nailed that part. It's boring. And just a little twitch. If I could get a little bit more out of you, I'm gonna get that passion out of you.
God, that's so amazing. And I mean, that's something that's missing too, is like a lot of people doing their, a lot of DJs, a lot of people have become famous from kind of pushing buttons and doing these things. And then you go and see a show and it's just so flat. Because like here you are just playing around with a whole bunch of stuff. You have like a bunch of modular synthesizers that you're unplugging and plugging into each other. When does the fun start?
Although I gotta say, I'm on the opposite of that argument with EDM DJs. For the longest time, of course, being an older dude and I love Led Zeppelin and play real music, don't play it on a laptop. I got into meeting a lot of EDM people, especially during dubstep and placing some of that music in a movie I did and a few other things. And so I got into some of them. And I realized, I was like, okay, I realized the art of what they're doing. Granted, they're not writing out the whole thing, but as far as sequencing goes and energy and reading a room, I would find some of these DJs, I'm like, man, they just did a 2-hour set. She's jumping up and down, pushing buttons, but she is like so much more animated than the rock band I saw last night.
Yes.
Who's just sitting there in concrete shoes and like trying to be cool, but like, she is just jumping up and down and like, she's part of the party. And so what I always tell all these musicians that hate EDM or anything having to do with DJ music, I'm like, it's so easy. Anyone can do it with a laptop, right? You can make $100,000 a year. Okay, here's my $10,000. Give me a hit song. Go do it. You have a laptop, go do it. I have made that bet to so many fucking musicians who will not take me up on it because there is an art to it. I can't do it. I've tried to write some EDM stuff and I suck.
It's the same. Well, same thing with like hip hop too. They're like, it's just like samples and it's just like, or house music. When you hear house music, you're like, I could do that. And you're like, no way in hell. Can you architect this to the way that they slam and bring those things in and drop out? And like, I mean, like, there's shakers and then there's, some bongos and then, like there's an art to that.
And the rises and all. And my thing is I love a 3-minute hit song. Like that's my ethos. I want, get me in, get me out, make it memorable, kill me with the chorus. That's what I absolutely love. And so I don't have this sense of anticipation of a 2.5 minute rise to the bass drop. I'm like, get to it, stop edging me. And and it's like, but they know how to do it so well. It's so dominatrix, and it's like, you were right. That felt so good.
whip, ball gag.
Totally.
So well, let's pivot into this too. It's a good transition into this. I was wondering if you had any thoughts about, using pre-existing music versus creating something from scratch. And then maybe you can touch on all the AI music generators that are coming about. Like, it's like if somebody's thinking, maybe I can just find a song that exists, or maybe we need to write one, or maybe this robot could write one. What's your thoughts on that?
Great question, Jake.
Thanks.
I don't have any thoughts on this hot topic.
Oh, really?
Wouldn't that be killer to have a podcast with that? Like, yeah, I have no thoughts on that. We'll see how it goes. No,
Doesn't matter. Doesn't make no one will know.
So there's two big questions there. I'll go with the pre-existing versus creating something from scratch first. So again, this kind of goes back to briefs. A lot of times the briefs sort of lead us into whether they want an 80s song or an 80s sounding song. Okay, those are two different things, right? An 80s song is I have to find a catalog piece that was recorded in the 80s, or an 80s sounding song, which means that they want me to create something or use my producer group to do that. So a lot of times the brief comes from that. A lot of times the music comes from that brief. But what's really been a trend lately in how they're asking for music, whether it's advertising or in like movies, films, and TV, all these three are kind of different. Same with gaming, is that sometimes they want, like there's music supervisors in a lot of these areas. In advertising, I guess I'll just stick to the sort of the marketing advertising side here. In advertising, it really comes down to sort of the creative director. The director of like an ad is really just brought in as talent, but they don't have a vision for the music that's behind it. A lot of times the brand ambassador, whoever's running the brand, or the creative director side of the agency, they're really the ones that want to do that, because they understand that like a pre-existing song to get a song synced is going to extend the brand messaging. And what that means is that either you find a song that is like not that doesn't work perfect with the ad. Okay, here's a great example. There's a recent ad with Ja Morant for Nike that Whedon Kennedy did. It's a dinky little song. It has nothing to do with running shoes, has nothing to do with Nike, has nothing to do with basketball. It has to do with the feeling of the ad. The director is not the person that does that. The copywriter is not the person that does that. The creative director usually is the person that does that, or the ACD. And from there, you've got to go and find that type of song. Like they want something that's like carefree, maybe nostalgic, maybe something that like talks of an older time where things were simpler. And it shows Ja Morant waking up in the morning and going to work and shooting in the gym, and then getting in his car and going home. And by the way, if you know anything about the Ja Morant story, this is also, trying to rebuild his persona again after being caught with a gun in a strip club in Denver on Instagram. And so they wanted something innocent, something that would evoke a better time. Like, so you would maybe go back to a 50 song or a 60 song for that, right? So what you do is you go back to that and you're like, okay, but that doesn't necessarily hit. Did someone cover it? They ended up using like a 1997 cover from a band called Swing Slow, which is actually two Japanese artists doing this cover of a 1951 song.
Good morning, Mr. Echo. How
So what you have to do as the music licensor or agent is help that creative agency go and find that type of music and give them options. But like my job is often finding that piece of music, knowing it can be what we call cleared, like knowing that there is a clear chain of who owns the master and who can sign off on the publishing to get it cleared. Because that's actually the most important part of all of these things is the song cleared? Can I get the right people, the rights holders, to sign off on it? Does Universal own it? Did it revert back to the band that did the recording? Where did the publishing go? Have they sold part of the publishing? How many co-writers? Were there split sheets involved? All of that stuff is kind of what you do on the music supervision side. And so it can get that in depth. That's just like one 30-second commercial.
Right.
And it can get that in depth, but when it works, I suggest you find this ad, John Morant, Good Morning, Nike, and you will see how well it works in this situation. And almost all of those kind of syncs, like in commercials, are songs that absolutely do not say exactly what you're seeing. So I will often get bands that like turn around a song that's called, no, like for instance, there was a band that had a song that's called Shine Like a Diamond.
Mm.
And they're like, we really think it'd be a great placement for like Zales, you know? And
Mm.
I'm like, okay, that is the exact opposite of what anyone would do for a Zales ad. The Zales ad is about I'm in love or this moment. It's not about the diamond. And so for musicians to kind of understand how the music works in commercials is really important to understand. It is almost never we're going on a drive and here's the song about a drive and I'm driving a truck and this is a song about a truck and the commercial's about a truck and about people driving. No, it's about like, you know, take me up to nowhere and I can't stop and what a great day. That's the song that you use.
And isn't
so
that the kind of shit that an AI music generator can't get to? Maybe.
most likely the quirkiness when it works is what makes it work, right? And I think that, like, to go to the AI side of things, look, it's not there yet. Some of it is a little bit scary on what it can do for underlying beds of music, and this is where we have a problem. For local or regional ads, you can enter in cinematic, anthemic, or, you know, dark overtone. Like, say for your lawyer ad, you could enter in like authoritative, authoritative, symphonic, dark foreboding, and you could probably get pretty close
Right.
to the right kind of underlying bad music. When it comes to lyrics, we're way far away on AI.
Yeah.
On the earliest stuff, and by the way, before we go any further, I bang on about this all the time. There is no such thing as AI. AI doesn't exist. This is LLM. It's machine learning.
Yep.
It's large language models. There's no such thing as AI. It's complete bullshit. But much like we say we're taping today, we've lost that argument. So we have to say AI, and I will, but just so the real AI people know, I know that you know that we know it's not AI. Okay,
God bless
so, but as far as like generators go, underlying bed music, and especially when you're getting into like, you know, YouTube underbed music, that used to be an area for like music catalogs like Epidemic, or there's a bunch of music catalogs. Adobe got into it at one point.
Right.
Trying to remember a few of the, but pretty much anywhere you can go get Shutterstock,
Well,
those
Pond
kind of things.
5 is another
Pond
one.
5, yeah. I had a friend who was making like 80 grand a year writing for Pond 5, and it was all about the search engine.
Yep.
Like how you write it, and then
Tag,
you
the
get it in.
descriptions. Exactly right.
Dude, this was back when it was ukulele and hand claps. Oh
I
my
remember
God.
that. Oh, do you remember
Every
the
fucking song brief I got was like, you know, happy, upbeat, ukulele, hand claps.
And you remember there was also solo, just one trumpet.
Just one trumpet,
somewhere
yes.
at the end. Do you know what I mean? And I was like,
Yes,
what is
totally.
this? What is this mode that
If
we're
it was
living
bluesy,
in?
it was a sax.
Yeah, right. Anyway,
Totally.
we can blame Mumford
so-
and Sons somehow.
So
Anyway,
AI, I think AI is, you know, for that kind of music, which look, in some ways is kind of throwaway music. It's 2 minutes, it's underlying. And look, I composed this, so I understand if you composed that, that was offensive to you. I get it, but we both know that we all know how to do it, and it's not too hard. And you write the riser, and you have the timpanis, and you build it, and it may sound great to you, but honestly, we can all bang one of those out in a day. And that may be an efficiency as musicians that we need, where we can have AI handle that one, and we'll be free to do more important music creation. So, like, I'm just not stupid to say that it's not going to ruin some of jobs, some of the industry. It will for that, I think. And I think we're already seeing it for that. It does a really good job at lo-fi.
right.
Does a really good job, mostly at instrumental stuff. And if that's the case, maybe we can get to arranging and sequencing songs better to get to the extra parts, right? So that you can write a top line quicker. You can write a melody quicker. Replace the melody, but you have the underlying chords better, that those are generated. So, I mean, it can be used. I think I have kind of the Peter Gabriel point of view about it, is that I'm not sure what it's going to be, but I want to know and learn what it's going to be before it overtakes me. And so I'm not fearful, but I'm concerned.
Excellent. Very measured answer.
Well, and also this, listen, it no AI is going to write lines like is a humiliating kick in the crotch, like from Sting and the Police.
Yeah.
And a dark Scottish, he sings Dark Scottish Lake in Synchronicity, right? And then on one line he sings Dark Scottish Loch. So to make you think about the Loch Ness Monster. Those little changes AI will never create. The misuses of lyrics. And so the more personal and creative you can be about especially lyric writing, and especially like so maybe your key change isn't a whole step, but your key change is like you go down like a quarter step instead of going up a whole step. That is something that's surprising, that isn't normal, that like, so what it was learning from, it will never pick that up. Those are what's going to take off for human creation, is the imperfections. And so as long as you continue to be a little imperfect, and this is what we're telling all of our artists and clients, is that, listen, you need to make sure that you are producing more. And stop being so precious about every single song. And to understand that part of it is making sure you finish, because there's gonna be imperfections in it, and that's what makes it human. And you're gonna get better. But like, even Paul McCartney has an album out in the last few years. Nobody knows one single on it. He's probably the best songwriter that's ever lived on earth right now. In numbers, definitely. In influence, probably. And you're not going to write the best song ever, every time. And very rarely do you. And so the point is like, get it done, get the music out, do your best, but like, make sure it's a snapshot of your life where it is. Stop being so precious about it. That will continue making it human. And that's our best fight against AI.
Man. So good Lord. Indeed. All right. So to try and distill all this down for our audience, if you had one piece of advice to give our listeners about making great sounding music for their marketing, what would it be?
Okay, so I have to caveat this, because I'm known for rejecting the one piece of advice premise, because art, entertainment, marketing are just more complicated. But I will say this, there is one in this, and that is, if there's no emotion evoked, you're dead in the water. So this goes back to what we were talking about before. It could be cheesy. It could be the best piece of music that makes someone cry. It could be something that like sticks in your head all day, like the Lizzo song or whatever. It could be an earworm. But if it does not evoke an emotion, if it just flies by, if you don't remember it in the kitchen when you're making dinner later in the night, you're not done. Like, if it's not bugging you as a songwriter, if it's not hanging in your head, you're not done. You're not done with the song. You need to go back to it. And again, this goes to the idea of like, just finish them and get them out. That may not be the one. Okay, let's move on, go to the next one.
Yep.
But I think that is the biggest thing, is that take big swings on emotion, whether it's happy, sad, cheesy, fun, or whether it is like something where you're trying to actually nail the messaging. Take a big swing on it. And maybe probably for the people that are creating music, the biggest piece of advice I would give to you is, don't just do one. You should, we call it the Trinity. Always try to work on 3 pieces of music at a time, because you can rip yourself off, right? Like, you can write 3 songs and you're like, that verse sucks, this chorus is good, that bridge is all right. hey, I might have a song here out of these 3. It's the same thing when you're working with clients. They're looking for you to turn in one, and you should. I wouldn't say push in and go, hey, by the way, I did this too on like a big national project. If they're asking for one, they want one. But for you as a creator, take a big swing at something, and then maybe on the next one, dial it back a little bit, and you might have a better feeling of like, hey, okay, that's the one. That's the song that or that's the melody or the little clip that I think sticks with me or brings me emotion. And by the way, that doesn't always have to be lyrics. It can also be, an interlude that has a cool rhythm behind it and a nice melodic part on a guitar or whatever, that sticks with you. So I mean, look, it always comes back to the hook. You got to have hooks somewhere, whether it's in music, whether it's in the composition, in the rhythm, in the lyrics. But if it's boring, you're not done.
Man, you're so freaking fantastic. I feel like
You are.
I opened up a treasure chest and there was Michael St. James inside of it.
Double D's.
So if people want to connect with you, they want to learn more about you. Where can they find you online and do that, Michael?
So I have a podcast called 2 Shots and a Royalty Check. You can search 2 Shots Music Pod. 2 Shots Music Pod, everywhere you get your social media, or 2shotsmusicpod.com. And I do this. It's kind of a fun and irreverent podcast about making a living in music. I have some stealth projects that are coming out that I can't really say on the air.
Yep.
See, again, this is something we die on this hill. This isn't on the air.
Nobody.
It's
Okay, no one say anything.
It's not to tape. Yeah. But that's where, I mean, you can follow me on Twitter, and if I see at Michael St. James, and if I look at your timeline, I'm locked down right now because of Elon. But I have burner accounts all over. I guess, here's the thing is that I, for the longest time would slap myself out to be music consultant to a lot of independent music people. And I realized that it wasn't a good use of my time. I would tell them exactly what to do. They wouldn't have enough money or they wouldn't do it. And so I stopped doing that. This is one of those things you learn when you're older. I'm like, it's not worth your time. It's not worth my time. And so I still do consulting sometimes to, okay, so this is off the air, but well, wait a minute.
Is it? No, it isn't.
I'll finish that. Okay. No, it's not.
We'll get back to that.
Okay. Here's what it is. I'm doing a secret stealth project called How to Completely Fuck Up Your Music Business. Because every guru out there is going to tell you how to get 100,000 fans and 20 million streams and sell records. I can do that too. But what you really need is someone to tell you the truth, is someone to tell you what you're doing wrong. And so I'm going about it differently and speaking to musicians how musicians speak. We're all pirates, and too many of us on this side of education for musicians have been trying to shoehorn them into the business. Well, you need to learn about royalties and rights and neighboring rights and the PRO.
Exactly.
Who fucking cares? Talk about drinking and talk about the rest of it and be real with me. And I remember what it was like to be a 22-year-old trying to figure this out, or 30-year-old trying to figure it out. It's just talk to me. We're in the green room having a beer, or we're in the back alley having a joint. Just talk to me. And so that is the program that I'm kind of building in the background of all this. And you'll hear that come out in, I think, July is when it's scheduled to. But so the big thing is 2 Shots and a Royalty Check, 2 Shots Music Pod. And you can follow me on Twitter, Michael St. James, St. James.
Time for a sound quiz.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
All right.
What is your favorite sound in the world?
The sound of a Coke opening. I love the ksh. I call them Coke kisses. When you put your nose down to it, it kisses your mouth and your, yeah.
That's amazing. Okay. Flip side of that, what is your least favorite sound?
A cat throwing up or screaming.
Mm,
Cat puking. Yeah.
that is, yeah.
Oh God, I fucking hate it. It's
Oh,
triggers all the abusive relationships I've been in.
okay. All right. So here is the sound quiz. Name this sound.
It's from a video game. Is it from Pac-Man? I wanted to say Defender, but
Mm.
you're
you're
Joust?
ooh, like it's like next close. Think Nintendo.
Duck Hunt. Fuck. Oh man, this is getting bad because it's probably the classic, isn't it?
Mhm.
Well, my first thought was Defender or Pac-Man, but it's probably Mario Brothers.
Boom. Yeah, it's Mario going into the pipe.
Yes,
going
Mario into the pipe. Yes, totally.
Yes. Man, good ears. Okay, here comes the next one.
Oh my God. Oh, is it it's not T-Mobile, is it?
Boom.
Is it
Yeah.
T-Mobile?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. T-Mobile. Yeah.
Dude. Okay. So, you know what? I'm just going to play it. I'm just going to play this.
Do
Okay.
it.
Really sorry.
Oh my God. So is that a peacock?
My God.
Bro, 3 for
Bro.
3.
You are the only person who's gone 3 for 3.
What's up? Love the
Unreal.
peacock.
Love the cock.
Love the cock.
I love the cock.
Sounds Like Marketing is a production of Audio Content Lab. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you find your podcasts, and follow Audio Content Lab for the latest in sound marketing advice. Until next time. Audio Content Lab.